Imagine for a second that you spent your entire life fighting to get the keys to your own house.
Right.
And you finally win. The keys are yours. You walk through the front door victorious, only to realize that the previous occupant still completely controls, like, how the house is decorated,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
what books are on the shelves, what food is in the fridge, even the language you're allowed to speak in the living room.
That's a nightmare.
Right. I mean, you have the deed to the property, sure, but is the house really yours?
Well, no, not at all.
Exactly. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are bringing you into a pretty profound exploration of that exact dilemma.
It really is, the ultimate paradox of liberation. I mean, what happens when a country gains its political freedom, but the collective mind of its people remains entirely colonized by the very forces they just kicked out?
And we are going to explore that question through a fascinating essay by Professor Rajneesh Kumar Shukla. It's titled Swaraj in Ideas. And, okay, let's unpack this right from the start because we have to define our terms here.
Sure.
If you know a bit of history, you probably associate the word Swaraj with Mahatma Gandhi. Specifically, his concept of Gram Swaraj, which was this very practical, grassroots vision for self-rule.
Right, because Gram means village.
Exactly. Gram Swaraj was about villages becoming economically and politically self-sufficient, effectively breaking the back of the British Raj in India. But this essay, Professor Shukla's essay, is pointing to something much deeper than just, like, who collects the taxes or who sits in the government offices.
Yeah, it's talking about the total liberation of the soul, the mind, and ideas from external subjugation.
Which is a massive undertaking.
It is. I mean, in the 20th century, you had this wave of brilliant Indian thinkers who kind of woke up to a terrifying reality.
Mm,
They looked around and realized that centuries of colonial rule hadn't just, extracted their physical wealth or
Yeah.
taken their land.
right.
It had fundamentally established a monopoly on their reality. The colonial power was dictating their education systems, their art, their philosophy, their entire worldview, basically.
They had internalized the colonizer's standard of what was considered, like, good or true or beautiful.
Exactly. They were looking at their own culture through the lenses prescribed by the people subjugating them.
So our mission today is to trace the roadmap out of that intellectual trap, using the source material provided. We're going to examine 4 visionary thinkers from this era who recognized this invisible prism and actually mapped out how to achieve true, authentic intellectual independence.
Yeah, and we should really start by looking at the year 1931.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So this is right in the thick of the fight for political independence. The tension is palpable. And K.C. Bhattacharya delivers this groundbreaking speech to the Indian Philosophical Congress.
Right.
He stands up in front of all these scholars who, by the way, have largely been educated in British institutions and are steeped in Western thought. And he just drops a conceptual bomb.
I love this part.
He tells them, they're striving for political freedom, but mentally, they have become nothing more than a shadow or a reflection of the West.
I found his diagnosis so fascinating because he doesn't just call everyone a brainwashed subject and leave it there. He breaks down the actual mechanics of how this intellectual slavery operates.
Yes, he does.
He draws this really hard line between 2 concepts: cultural assimilation and cultural subjection,
Right. So assimilation is a critical, conscious choice.
like an active process.
Exactly.
Mhm.
It happens when a culture encounters a foreign idea, evaluates it from a place of grounded self-assurance, and decides to adapt it to fit their own needs. You take what is useful without losing your original identity.
Okay. And subjection.
Subjection is the insidious alternative. That is the blind acceptance of foreign ideas simply because they emanate from the ruling class. You assume those ideas are superior by default, so you skip the critical evaluation entirely.
I was reading this section of the essay, and it made me think about how we interact with our technology. Yeah, like, cultural assimilation is like downloading a really useful app onto your smartphone. You need a calendar, you download a calendar app, your phone still belongs to you, it just has a new tool.
That makes total sense.
But cultural subjection is like letting a foreign developer completely overwrite your phone's operating system overnight.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Suddenly, the interface is unrecognizable, the underlying code is different, and the way the phone processes every single piece of data is altered by someone else. You don't even realize you're operating on their terms because the very framework of your reality has been swapped out.
That is a perfect analogy. When a new operating system is installed, it changes the default settings of your mind. And Bhattacharya actually took this a step further by breaking human ideas down into 3 distinct categories to show exactly where this hacking occurs.
Okay, let's break those down. What's the first one?
First, you have universal ideas. Think of mathematics or basic logic. 2 plus 2 is 4, regardless of your cultural background.
Right, nobody is culturally colonizing algebra.
Exactly. Then the second category is assimilable foreign ideas.
Which are what?
These are things like scientific methodologies, engineering practices, maybe administrative systems. You can import them, and they function perfectly well within your own cultural context.
Okay, so where's the danger zone?
The third category, that is the vulnerability. These are culture-specific ideas. We're talking about concepts of life, the nature of the soul, ethical frameworks, and the very definitions of beauty and aesthetics.
Ah, so these are the ideas that actually give a society its distinct flavor and purpose.
Exactly. They grow organically from the specific history, the spiritual experiences, and the daily geographic realities of a particular people.
Right.
So Bhattacharya argued that when you blindly import this third category, when you let another culture define what the soul is or what constitutes great art, you actively kill your own capacity for original creation.
Wow.
You stop generating your own philosophy. Your society stops producing original thinkers and instead produces a society of mere translators.
You just end up spending your life writing footnotes to someone else's philosophical text instead of writing your own book.
Precisely.
Professor Shukla includes an incredibly powerful quote from Bhattacharya in the essay. He says, "Political freedom is only the outer freedom. Unless we have freedom in ideas, we remain slaves in our own house."
It's a haunting image, but, it also reveals the limitation of Bhattacharya's diagnosis.
How so?
Well, he perfectly identified the intellectual problem. But intellectual awareness alone isn't really enough to break a deeply ingrained habit of subjugation.
Which begs the question, if knowing your mind is colonized doesn't automatically free it, what is the actual mechanism for breaking those chains?
And that requires shifting from the intellect to the spirit, which is what our next thinker, Sri Aurobindo, attempted to do.
Right, Sri Aurobindo.
He took this concept of Swaraj in ideas and elevated it to an absolute spiritual necessity.